Welcome, man. Early Star Wars Newsnet pod for you on this Tuesday. Recording this on Monday, but we're going to drop this on Tuesday. We're going to be talking greatest space battles, our favorite space battles in all of the Star Wars movies. I'm joined by Tom. Second time around here. First pre-record, got the live show out of the way. Now we're pre-recording. And Tom, not that you are not in the upper echelon of all Toms in the world. But I have to, no offense to you, I have to say that, how does it feel knowing that you share the name with, the GOAT, Tom Cruise himself? And when I tell you, I saw the Mission Impossible trailer drop today, I dropped everything to watch it. And anytime this man starts sprinting in a trailer or a movie, I'm like doing like the Leonardo DiCaprio, like pointing me, like, there it is. Like, that's it. Like, that is peak cinema right there. I'm already seated for this movie. And I think we both feel like very similarly as you were sharing with me right before.
Yeah, exactly. It dropped as soon as I got into a meeting at work. So on my second screen, I had it ready to go at the first frame and just waiting for the meeting to end to hit play. And of course, it didn't disappoint.
My students were wondering what like the hell's wrong with Mr. Bradshaw today, because I'm sitting around walking through the class going, and I like take a few seconds, like, I'm going through. And then a few students that actually have seen the Mission Impossible. So if I stopped, like one of these students, he goes, and I was like, he knows. I'm like, bonus points. Here you go. Like take some points for your team this week. That's what I'm talking about right there. That's I cannot wait for that movie. Is going to be just IMAX times 10 for me. Probably go see it multiple times. But
sounds great. And there's no task too mundane. If you're washing dishes or anything, if you start humming that music, it automatically makes it exciting.
Oh, you're so right. Like I'll break dishes when I start humming that, because I'll start trying to toss them, catch them behind my back or something, and it
that's Cocktail. Tom Cruise movie.
So we're doing space battles today. We're gonna go through our favorite, like what are the best space battles, like personal favorites in all of the saga, plus Rogue One and Solo, of course, are included in those Star Wars movies for us. So we did a little poll today, and the winner of that poll for what most people consider to be their favorite space battle, I can't say I'm surprised because of the more recency of this movie, and you have Endor, but I was a little surprised Scarif was like the number one choice. And I know you're partial to Scarif, so we're going to talk about Scarif first. And let me just pull this up here. And just to begin, when we're talking about space battles and the Battle of Scarif, the Republic fleet launching out of hyperspace on Scarif is just an all-time shot. When you get all these ships coming out, and then you see the Ghost, for the Rebels fans, knowing that the Ghost is right there, that they were, in Phoenix Squadron might be a part of this. It just adds so much to the lore for the Star Wars fans. But everything about that Scarif space battle is great, from the different characters it introduces, the shots of the shield closing, the Blue Squadron trying to get down. So you're a big Scarif battle fan. Where is it in this battle? Like, is that like a favorite moment for you? Favorite shot? And what draws you into Scarif maybe more so than the others?
I guess before we really dive into it, I was thinking about this with space battles. I have a lot of things that I like in a space battle and things I don't like.
Okay.
When I talk about the things I like, when I think about the ones that are the most memorable to me, and to be honest, I've never met a Star Wars battle I didn't like. So, but for me, it's the intensity and action, number one. Number two, the artistry, the choreography, and the originality in how it's designed. And also, number three, the storytelling, what the stakes are, how I identify with the characters, and what draws me in. Because Absolutely. It could be the most visually stunning, or I don't want to say that, but like it could have the most really cool special effects and shots. But if you're not invested in the story and the characters, it doesn't really have the full impact to me. But Scarif has everything.
It just turns into a Fast and Furious chase.
Yeah. Well, I guess I should get to that list of things I don't like. I don't like when, and I've seen it in other franchises or other movies, sci-fi or whatnot, where it's just let's throw a bunch of ships on the screen, a bunch
Mm,
of crazy action, and a mess of explosions, and it's almost like impossible to read. You can't really, it's really hard to follow the action.
mm,
You're not really as invested maybe in the characters um, as much. So I don't like, when a movie or a sequence tries to just dazzle you with
right.
putting 1,000 ships on the screen without really any
Mhm.
context, or it makes it really hard to follow. You have to be able to follow the action. But
Absolutely. And there's different characters that are introduced only for space battles. And they're not going to be on screen very long. A lot of times our space battle people are only on our screen for a handful of seconds, even minutes. And being able to tell a space battle story where you care about the character that ultimately explodes, and it's just not like, oh, there goes another random side character. Because there's so many like random characters that I'm like, I love that guy, but he's only in this, one scene, one space battle for 2 seconds, but he just captures you for just a moment.
right. And sometimes there have been some glorious deaths that you've really like. I hate to say this, it's like almost enjoyable. You
Mhm.
feel bad for that character, or you kind of, um, like the way that some of them bail out. Like, it's just a very cool
Oh yeah.
sequence. It kind of adds the experience. Like when Porkins bites
That
it
was
in
that's
the
the number
trench.
one, right? That's the number one. That's the number one. I'm thinking, yep, this has got to be Porkins. Because
Um,
how is it that let me get this off the screen for a second because I want to say this, see what your reaction is. Because how is it so interesting you juxtapose, and we'll talk about Scarif in a minute, but you think about how maybe someone feels when Biggs dies, and we just met Biggs in A New Hope, but you're like, that's Luke's best friend, he just died.
right.
And then you think of when Porkins dies, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's good. That's funny.
Just
Like,
that scream that he lets out is
so
definitely
classic.
awesome.
No,
Um,
that's absolutely true on the being able to tell that story. I'm with you. I don't love it just like, let me just see how much I can do in this one scene and then awe you with everything that's happening, but it gets lost in the shuffle for sure.
right. So I think Scarif to me has everything. I mean,
Mhm,
you're invested with what's happening in the context of the story, what's happening on the ground. The choreography of the shots is beautiful.
mhm,
I know I've seen some of the behind the scenes stuff where they actually did some VR. They used some VR tools to map out
mhm,
some of the battle. The Hammerhead Corvette ramming the Star Destroyer, the run into the shield,
mhm,
just some amazing visuals, but very easy to follow. And as an old trilogy guy, to see the old X-Wings go up
mhm.
against TIE fighters, it almost felt like it was just part of that original
Mhm.
trilogy. Like it came
Right.
out in the early 80s or the late 70s.
Mhm.
Just beautifully shot uh, and choreographed. So it had something
Mhm.
for everyone in that battle.
And there's some fun parallels here where you have the Corvette that rams the Star Destroyers into each other, and then the shot of the Star Destroyer going into the shield very much reminds me of like Endor when you see Vader's Star Destroyer go and it rams into like I think it's like the Death Star or like whatever it rams into, but
Right.
it very much reminds me of that when I see it, and so I love that. You also get the shot in this of you have the Death Star, when it appears out of hyperspace and it's just looming over the planet, just very, just the presence of the Death Star just feels so intense and just this ominous feeling of what's about to happen. I really love that. You mentioned the characters and you talk about characters, and I actually did this for all of our battles because I agree. Every great space battle has like that one character that you like grab onto. And for me, for whatever reason, I love the Mon Calas. Like I just love a Mon Calamari. And Admiral Radis is the man because
Yep.
he's kind of like our narrator of the space battle. Like quickly get through that shield, calls in the Hammerhead Corvette. They talk about something coming out of hyperspace. He calls it out. He's the one that says, you know, farewell, Rogue One, or whatever he says at the end. May the Force be with you. So he's kind of like one of our storytellers, and he's voiced by Steven Stanton, who voices a ton of Star Wars characters, including, Meeber Gascon, one of my all-time favorite Glubshitos from the Clone Wars. And so there's always those little characters that I just kind of gravitate to in a space battle. And he's one of them that it felt like, very much like we're going to channel some Admiral Akbar in for some Rogue One. And we got that with Radis. So I absolutely love what he brings to the table in this battle.
I totally agree. And I feel like, you said, if you heard it on paper before the movie, like, well, isn't it kind of a ripoff of what they did with Admiral Akbar and Return of the Jedi? But it's so perfect. It feels so natural to have a Mon admiral leading the battle. And like you said, he almost narrates the action of the battle. So, and just an amazing performance.
It's fascinating too when you just see the amount. I love the shots where you just see the amount of TIE fighters that just come out of the hangar bays instantly. And it's always funny how late the Imperials are to get the TIEs out. It seems like the X-Wings always have and enough time to cause maximum amount of damage before, they finally mobilize the troops. But then you just see the massive amount of TIEs that come out in this. And you wonder, how are they going to overcome all of these TIE fighters? It's so great. I love the little Easter egg in this, not really an Easter egg really, but we see how there is an opening for Red 5 when Luke joins the rebellion very soon after.
Right.
When we see the worst pilot in the rebellion, Red 5. I mean, the group, Red Squadron's all going, together. And then you see Red there, Red 5, like, where are you going? And he's like off by himself, completely leaving his wingman, and of course gets obliterated in about 5 seconds. And the way that he's kind of like this little Weasley little dude too, I thought was funny. Like, it almost made us want to think that, okay, we're upgrading so hard when we get Luke Skywalker into Red 5, it's not even a joke.
But I guess they didn't know that. They said, okay, we'll give the newbie that call sign because, there's a vacancy there. We'll throw the new guy in, see what he does.
Yeah. So
also, another cool Easter egg is Blue Squadron. Because in the original, I guess, novelization of A New Hope, Blue Squadron was going to be leading the charge against the X-Wing Squadron against the Death Star at Yavin. And they changed it. If I get the lore correct, I think they changed it to Red Squadron because it was hard to do the blue on the X-Wings with all the blue screen that they were using for that sequence. So so Blue Squadron was not really nowhere to be found in A New Hope, and they kind of explain it with how Blue Squadron is used in Rogue One and subsequently taken out, I think, on the surface of Scarif. So
I love that, like, lore bit. I didn't know that. That's fascinating. And just getting little bits like that is great. One last thing for me on Scarif too was I love a good Y-wing. And we don't have a lot of just action shots with Y-wings in general. It's usually the X-wings that are doing all the fancy maneuvers. And you get a lot of that when they're, going through the different, different spindly things of the base, like the different tunnels, and they're going through, avoiding all the blaster shots. But we get good Y-wings, like, anyone who's ever played Battlefront knows the Y-wings are like your great bombers. Like, they come in and do bombing, and we see like the Y-wings come with their little ion torpedoes, their photon torpedoes, and like they come in, they're just dropping bombs on the shield. And I kind of loved that just aspect of getting a few shots of them just coming through, dropping their bombs, and then continuing like another run. Like, I don't know, that's another nerd thing. I'm like, yes, we get a good Y-wing bomb run.
Y-wings are amazing. They're just the design, like you said, and to see them used for their purpose, it's really cool in this battle. And then when you get to the end of the battle, you have the whole Vader setup, which is unbelievable.
And I love too. We get the footage of the Gold Leader, Gold Leader, Red Leader coming in with the different calls, and it just adds to the connectivity of A New Hope as well, which is why I can't wait to rewatch this movie after Endor season 2, just because it's gonna feel so great to watch Endor season 2 straight into Rogue One, straight into A New Hope. I think I'm just gonna carve out an entire like Saturday, and I'm just gonna watch Endor, take a little break, watch Rogue One, take like a couple hour break, and then jump right into A New Hope. I think I'm gonna plan out just to carve out a whole day for that experience.
Yeah, that's definitely something on my list as well.
So that's Battle Scarif, and that was like number 1 on our list. Also number one in your heart as well. So if you were picking a number two, like favorite space battle, where would you go next? What journey are you taking in Star Wars?
I would go straight to Endor.
Okay,
Um,
perfect. Because that
Endor,
is also my like that's my number one. So I love that you said that.
honestly, I think Endor and Scarif, to me, it's so close. And a lot of times when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, Endor, I think, edges it for me. I think what edges it is some of the nostalgia too, because I
Mhm,
remember seeing Return of the Jedi as a child in the movies, and just that battle at the end was so advanced for what
mhm,
we'd seen up to that point in the original trilogy. And
mhm,
again, getting back to choreography, and I think there's something to be said in the original trilogy. And I'll mention this later on too, because there's another battle that I want to pick out at the end, maybe as an honorable mention. But there was something about the motion of the Millennium Falcon that was almost like poetry.
mhm,
The way it matched the score, the beautiful John Williams score, and the way it moved was just
mhm,
so amazing. And I don't know if we've well, we may have gotten close in the we've seen some great shots in the sequel trilogy, but the way that it moved through that battle, and the
mhm,
choreography and the way that it was cut is just so amazing.
mhm.
Following it around the Rebel cruiser at like that point of POV shot of it going through and then blasting through um, a TIE fighter was just seeing that
Yeah,
like
that was too
on a
close.
big screen.
That was too
Unbelievable.
close.
Yeah,
It's
I'm sorry. I'm doing all the talking. I'll let you
no,
jump in.
no, 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 no. No, it was that was it's one of my favorite battles in all of Star Wars. The reason why Endor is my number one space battle for is because a lot of times the space battles don't feel as big as what's going on because Star Wars loves to do these trifectas where there's three different, and Phantom Menace, you have, the three different, battles going on. In Return of the Jedi, you have, what's going on with Luke and Vader, everything going on with Planet Endor, the space battle. There's a lot of times these battles, like Scarif's very similar too. You have the three different, places of urgency. But and a lot of times the space battle maybe feels a little less than the others. To me, this one it's perfect. Like it is on par with everything else going on. The stakes feel so high, and it helps that you have a rebellion that's not only going against the Death Star again, like they did against Yavin, but they're going against the Death Star, and you have the entire like Imperial fleet nearly of Star Destroyers that's also out there boxing them in. And you're going into this, that they're waiting for them, and you are absolutely terrified for what's going to happen to the rebellion, even though in your heart it's Star Wars, like they're going to come out on top, right? But every time I watch this, I'm like, it's just elevated so much. And there's a level of charisma that Billy D. Williams has as Lando that's
Yeah.
really unmatched in all of Star Wars. And for him to be leading the charge, I think just elevates this battle once again. The trench is a little tighter. It's a little bit, they're boxed in a little bit more. You have the TIE fighters coming in. I love they have different Imperial ships fighting them, not just TIE fighters in this as well. We get, the Y Wings, you see B Wings, you see the X Wings, you have the Falcon leading the charge. There's just so much going on in this, but you never lose track of what's happening because, like you said, the score with the motion of like the ships is perfectly in sync. There's never too much happening, but there's enough going on where you're completely entranced.
And there's a musicality, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but if you watch it, there's a musicality to the editing that what's coming next when he's
Mm-hmm.
like, Han will get that shield down. He just needs a little more time, and it
Mm-hmm.
cuts on that. It's almost like a rhythm to it,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think it's such a visceral feast.
Mm-hmm.
With the visuals, the dialogue, the stakes, what's going on with Luke and the Emperor, and yeah, I remember
Mm-hmm.
just every time I see it, it has not lost
Mm-hmm.
anything in it, all the years I've watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Just such a it feels like a climactic battle, and it
Mm-hmm.
delivers on that.
Right.
Like you knew that at the end of that movie, you needed something like that, and it
Mm-hmm.
delivers completely.
Absolutely. And then of course we have to throw in the famous, now memed line, of course, of it's a trap, of Admiral Akbar, who is he's like the star of the show in many ways here, where I wasn't alive when Return of the Jedi happened, so I want to ask you personally, as someone who lived this movie coming out, everyone coming in, about the big three, about Vader and everything. Was Admiral Akbar, like, how talked about was Admiral Akbar after? Because I feel like at this point, when we're almost, we're like 40 years removed from this movie, nearly, it's basically, he's like this, the mythos of Admiral Akbar is so great.
It's so funny because one thing I remember, they used to have these specials when I was young with the action figures that you could, I'm showing my age, but you would actually mail in a proof of purchase of a couple of figures that you had, and you'd get you'd get a prepaid postage, and you'd get a figure in the mail. Like they had for Empire, it was Boba Fett. For Return of the Jedi, it was Admiral Akbar. So it was the first time we've ever seen this character, because we didn't have the internet back then. There was no
Right.
social media, obviously. The first time, what we could maybe glean from maybe like a picture from a trade magazine or something about a preview, and when the trailer finally launched. But like the first introduction we had to this character was this little, what were they, 4-inch action figures. So it was like, it looked like such an interesting design, cool character. And I think, honestly, it's funny because when he says it's a trap, I think people laughed, and it was almost, but like kind of like you say, like now that it's a meme and everything, it could be goofy and also awesome at the same time. That was the magic of a lot of the magic of Return of the Jedi, and especially a lot of those characters in those days. It could be cheesy and goofy, but also awesome, and everyone was saying that. Obviously, I think the meme kind of pushed it, like as it's only gained steam over the years. But even back then, like that was a character that people would like imitate.
Or even you have like Nine Numb that's in the movie,
Yes.
and he's the guy sitting next to Lando. He's been introduced in the most pivotal seat in all, like he's taking the place of Chewie in the Falcon, like something that's maybe the absolute opposite of what Chewie represents, which is brute force, physicality, imposing figure. And you have this goofy looking guy and the Num that's there, and Lando's going through all this, and he's just it's goofy, it's funny, but it works. You're like, is this guy gonna be okay? And then when he goes down and Rise of Skywalker, you're like, not Nyan Num, not him.
Yeah. It's true. And I remember, and I was watching Endor again because I know we were getting prepared for this. And, to see him, and I'm laughing and everything, it was just so, it was funny, but like I said, it just worked. Somehow it just worked. You accepted it and you thought it was awesome.
I'm a big Last Jedi supporter. Love The Last Jedi. It's one of my favorite Star Wars movies. However, justice for Akbar getting just absolutely nuked off the bridge like that.
Yeah,
he's not like he's a character that has a lot of weight in terms of the importance of everything going on in the galaxy. Like he has a small role, all things considered, in Star Wars, but there was just a level of legend to his character where I'm like, man, this guy didn't deserve to just be one of the guys that was killed off in the beginning of a movie with Leia also there, and then she survives. That's like the one thing of that movie. If I really wish he could either survive or get maybe more like glorious death. Like maybe he was the one instead of Admiral Holdo that did the launch. Like that's just like a very epic way for him to go out.
Yeah, that is a shame. I do like that movie quite a bit. And that is one thing that I wish I could change, because he did kind of go out like without much ceremony in that scene, and if he was going to make a sacrifice, I think they could have given more gravitas to it. Definitely. And we should have a podcast about that one day, about that movie, because I have strong feelings about it.
Of course.
I understand some of the criticism, but I do enjoy it. And it's interesting that you say, I know there's quite a lot of years between the two of us, and I feel seeing it as an older person, I enjoyed it more because I identified more with Luke. But that's for another podcast. We'll talk about that another time.
I love that. So I'm gonna pick one, and I'm gonna move away from the original trilogy. We've done Rogue One, we've done Endor. I'm gonna move away from that timeline, and I'm going to one that always has a soft spot on my heart. And we're gonna go to the Battle of Naboo, Phantom Menace. I just rewatched this movie a few days ago, like on last Friday. And the N1 Starfighter is my favorite ship in all of Star Wars. It is rivaled. There's only a handful that I would say I love more in terms of just design, because in terms of just what gives me the best feeling, it's the Falcon. Like, of course, like every Star Wars fan, when you see the Falcon, you just get happy inside. But in terms of just the design, I mean, I had one of the growing up, I'm a prequel trilogy kid. And growing up, I had one of those big old like M1 starfighters there. I had multiple like tiny ones. I had different, pilots that were in the Phantom Menace as well. And I was always flying that thing around. I still have that somewhere in storage. I know, like I need to get that from like my parents' attic or something. It's in storage. And I just love the look of them, how sleek they are. There's a great explanation in one of the ILM Light and Magic film short things that they were talking about. It's either that one or it's one of the galleries. I forget where I watched it. And it was like Doug Chang was talking about how when they were making Phantom Menace and George wanted the Naboo starfighters just to sit, like they floated. They didn't have like the landing gear. They just stopped in air and they just floated there because it was like Attack of the Clones when it lands. And I think it was like Doug Chang was like, we need to put landing gear in because like all the ships in the original trilogy they had landing gear there. And George said, no, they don't have landing gear. And they're like, but it doesn't make sense. This is earlier in the time. He's like, it doesn't matter. Like we just don't. And that it was apparently something that happened often. But I love some of those things about Star Wars. It's very goofy that they're like the only ship that just floats. Every other ship kind of lands, but they just sit there and that's okay. It makes sense. I love this because of I think the Nemoidians are hilarious. There is the level of their ships can't even penetrate the shielding of the Trade Federation control ship, so it just feels hopeless the entire time. But you're just watching them zoom in and out and everything going with the different battles. I think this one gets lost in the shuffle because of how epic Duel of the Fates is, and you have everything going on with the Gungans. But I will always have a soft spot for this one.
Yeah, and again, well, I will definitely echo your sentiments. I think it's a gorgeously designed ship. I think Doug Chang said that. I think that they tried to do almost like a retro, since they were going back in the past for the
Mm-hmm.
prequels. They wanted to have designs, especially a place like Naboo, that they had they had a very artistic
Absolutely.
design history. So
Mm-hmm.
they model that after, I think, a hood ornament on like a Chevy hood
Mm-hmm.
ornament or
That's
one of
awesome.
those cars. And it's a beautifully designed ship that,
Mm-hmm.
sleek. And I love in the Battle of Naboo how they used it. Some
Mm-hmm.
of the shots are amazing of some of the spins and
Mm-hmm.
um, some of the, like I said, the choreography. I
Right.
really appreciated that.
And you mentioned the artistry and almost the regalness of those. They feel like very high class almost. And in the original trilogy, most of the ships, it's like you have the gray against like the black TIE fighters, gray and black. But I love the stark contrast in the color. Like the Falcon, or sorry, the fighters, the Naboo starfighters, they're just so bright and they just pop. And then you just have the
Mhm.
mass of dark gray, vulture droids or whatever of the Trade Federation. And it helps us even see like the difference in like the numbers, because you just see this handful of pilots making their way against the hundreds of vulture droids. But I love how just much they're very bright, they stand out, where they are. And that says something about Naboo. Like when you see the royal ship coming in all sleek and pristine, and that like chrome followed by, flanked by the M1 starfighters, it's a great like visual representation of what Naboo is. And
Mhm.
like every great space battle, there is a character that I absolutely gravitate to, and that's our good man, Mr. Rick Ollie. Like this guy, I don't know what it is about him, but that line of like where he's like, "We didn't hit it," like it just it gets me every time. We didn't hit it, and then he does the whole yee, one of those. It gets me every time.
Yeah, that was definitely a fun moment.
And there's every space battle too almost has one of those. Like we mentioned Endor just a minute ago. Lando has his one of those. It's like the celebratory scream from the
Right,
pilots.
exactly.
Where are you at? 'Cause I think what turns off a lot of people with the Battle of Naboo is some of the "I'll try spinning. That's a good trick," or "Now this is pod racing." Some of the little cheesy lines from Jake Lloyd and young Anakin. Where are you on those? Like, does that take you out of it, and you're like, all right, or are you kind of like, I love the fact this kid is saying this?
In when I first saw it, it did a bit. It was very different from what Phantom
Mhm.
Menace was very different from what I expected.
Right.
Just the last Star Wars movie I saw before the Phantom Menace was Return of the Jedi when I was
Mhm.
11, and then Phantom Menace came out. I was what 27 years,
Mhm.
and so I was in a different part of my life, and
Mhm.
I was one of the I was a little more critical when it first came out, but as time has gone by, as we've had the other prequel
Mhm.
films and Clone Wars, I've
Of course.
gotten more nostalgic about it, and it doesn't
Mhm.
really bother me anymore,
Mhm.
like it did. I mean, it's sometimes a little goofy, but
Right.
it kind of the older I get, when I look back at some of the things I didn't even love, or I didn't love about maybe the prequels or criticisms that I had about certain moments, even in the original
Mhm.
trilogy, or I look back and I see, George Lucas's body of work, and he was just such a genius with all the underlying themes and things that you just still pick out when you see them
Right.
today. So it for me, it's aged well.
Mhm.
So I've gone to I've grown accustomed
Mhm.
to it. When it first came out, it was a little jarring. It was also the first Star Wars in 16 years, so um, it was not as much what we expected. Although the
Mhm.
visuals always blew me away of
Right.
that movie. It was a just aesthetically beautiful movie to look at.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I said, as the time has gone by, it's actually I've learned to love it more.
Okay. I this is gonna sound crazy. I have probably watched Phantom Menace more than any other Star Wars movie, just because I don't know, it's one of the first movies I have like vivid memories of. And so like I love talking to people who were there for the original trilogy and like what that experience was like going to Phantom, because the it's just a very drastic change in tone and visually as well, of course, but in what the story was probably expected to be versus what George wanted to do. And there's a lot of fair criticisms of that. But for me, I was born in 97. And when I was like 5 years, 4 or 5 years old, I started watching, the original trilogy with my dad. And then, Phantom was already out at that point. And so we had like the DVD, we'd watch that. I had all the action figures from, the prequel era. Like that was all I wanted as a kid. I remember one Christmas morning when the year Attack of the Clones like came out, after Attack of the Clones came out that Christmas. Like all I got for Christmas was my dad, when I woke up, had lined up different ships and action figures, like from like where my room was to like the living room, which we got this like tiny house. And so he had lined them up, and so I was like walking out, thinking
Oh
Santa
wow!
had come, and I saw like all these like action figures and starships from the Attack of the Clones, and or from Phantom Menace, or some of them were like original trilogy. And so that was great. And then, I mean, I grew up, my uncle was big into Star Wars as well. And he had just passed down to me all his action figures from, the 70s and 80s. And so I have, all the original action figures still from 1977, 1980, and
Wow!
so I love and I cherish those. As well. So I always like hearing what was that change like. Because for me, it was just, this is Star Wars. Like, my
Right,
first movie that I remember going to see was Attack of the Clones in theaters. So I enjoy hearing like the differences of opinions, just like I like, some of my students that love Star Wars that are 12, 13 years old. I'm like, which movie did you watch first? Or which ones do you like? And for them, Star Wars is The Mandalorian for some of them. Or,
right.
the first droid they think of as BB-8. And, it's fascinating to me. But so that's Phantom. That's for me always going to be a DLD pleasure.
Well, I
Where
always
are we
say
going? Go for it.
before I just on that topic one more time, and I tell people, because we all love Star Wars, but we all had different entry points.
Mhm.
And when we go to sit and watch it, it's like every footstep that we took has come from a different place. So it's like we
Mhm.
have things that we love, that we things that we may not love as much, and that's why I hate when the fan base gets very cynical and
Mm,
maybe hateful about certain things, because like when you described that Christmas morning for
mhm.
right after Attack of the Clones, I had the same experience after The Empire Strikes Back. Like I
Mhm.
got the AT-AT when I was a kid, and I couldn't wait until it snowed so we could go out in the snow with it. And so it's like when you said that, it made me think of it, because we had different entry points, and your
Mhm.
story is just as valid as my story. Just
Absolutely.
because I was there from the beginning of the saga
Mhm.
doesn't make me a better fan than you, or like,
Right. Mhm.
so, and it's great, so we could talk about those things, and it's great to
Mhm.
hear it. And when I hear people tell me their experience of the prequels, and then I think of my own, it makes me appreciate them more for
Mhm.
what they are, and what Lucas intended them to be.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in.
No, I love that. I love that. Where are we going next? What battle, space battle would you like to go next?
Okay, one of my favorites, really high on my list, the Battle of Coruscant.
Okay, I knew I had that queued up. Like I was like, I know where he's going next. I love that. So good, like the Battle of Coruscant starts off. You get the two Jedi Star Cruisers around that, the one, Republic, cruiser there, and it goes over and it boom, just this insane battle that's going on, just above the planet's atmosphere. Maybe one of the, if not the best, just entrance to a Star Wars movie. I mean, it's hard to
Agreed.
beat that.
Agreed.
Where
Yeah, I mean,
about
and
yeah.
like I said earlier, one of the things that I don't like about space battles when they're not done well is that it's just too much. But
Mhm,
there's like this, it's almost like a beautiful mess,
mhm,
like this organized chaos with, and,
mhm,
and a lot. It's the cinematography, it's the shots and the choreography of the ships. Even though all hell is breaking loose, it's just
mhm.
beautiful to look at. The sound design,
Oh, the sound.
just all the little Easter eggs in there that you might be able to pick out.
Mhm.
There's one, I don't know if you heard that they they said they want to throw everything in the kitchen sink in there. So there's one shot. If you look closely, if you have to probably like zoom in all the way, but there's like a kitchen sink getting shot into another ship. So
That's
th-
incredible.
they really pulled out all the stops.
Mhm.
The action is amazing. What a
So I
great way, like you
disagree a
said.
little bit with some of the action. People talk about the action. The one nitpick, I love this shot, this scene, and everything with the space battle as well. The one problem I do have is it feels like Obi-Wan and Anakin just fly a straight line to Grievous's ship. Like there isn't like outside of the first beginning where they kind of weave down and then they have like the little barrel roll through, the some of the explosions. It's kind of like they just fly a straight line to Grievous's ship, and there's so much happening here that I'm like, I feel like there should be a little bit more going on. Yes, they're dealing with the buzz droids, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I that was my one criticism, was it just feels like we're on a straight line. And then a lot of the Clone Wars battles too, like they're having to take these alternate routes. They're having to readjust their plan, and with so many ships fighting, there's so much chaos going on. It felt like there should have been a little bit more of a barrier between them and Grievous's ship, but you don't really notice that so much when you're watching it for the first time. I think it's more of a second time through, after the awe and spectacle of it all settles in, that I kind of noticed that and I'm like, interesting.
Yeah, I never really picked that up. There are some, yeah, I mean, some things maybe like some lines maybe throw away, but as far as that, I guess I always saw it as them chasing after Grievous because he was leaving
Hmm.
Coruscant with Palpatine.
Hmm. That's fair.
But but yeah, I think that's a good point too. Like, there could be, like in Endor, we talked about some of the other battles. There was a lot of like uh circling around,
Hmm.
going between ships and that. And you see that in the beginning of this battle. But yeah, I
Hmm.
guess you can make that point as well.
One thing that I do appreciate, and there's a couple of things here, the little like doink, like clunk sound whenever the torpedoes get launched and they fall out, like the metal falls out and it launches, like the casing falls out in the ships. In Bad Batch, the season one, where they're like on the scavenging moon and there's one of those cruisers there, and they like launch like one of the cannons and it falls, like they use the same exact sound for Revenge of the Sith. And I think one of them, like someone on Twitter had reached out to one of the sound guys for Bad Batch. He was like, was that intentional? Like, did you use the same exact sound, or is my mind playing tricks? Like, no, we wanted it to be authentic. Like, it is the exact same sounds. I love how that is something that it's just, you hear it and you know what it is, but it's hard to pinpoint like how to describe it. And then the second thing is, when my friends and I were playing Battlefront Friday night, for like me and some of my friends, is like kind of like guys' night. We usually go work out and then we play Battlefront. That's kind of like all we do. We just do that every Friday night for the
Nice.
most part. And what gets said every single Friday night, at least a dozen times at some point, when someone picks up like an orbital strike, or we get a few thermal detonators, and we panic, is someone yells out like, "Oh, batteries, fire, fire!" And suddenly we just launch it. And like, that line has always stuck out to me from this space battle, and it makes me laugh every time. Just the Moidian is like, "Oh, batteries, fire, fire!" And it's like, what have they been? What do you think they're doing the entire time? Like, all they're doing is just firing.
There's some dialogue in a lot of battles, and some of the ground battles too, that are just, they're kind of like, it's they're so obvious about what saying
But I
exactly
love
what,
it. I love it though. It's
but yeah,
hilarious.
it's part of the charm of it.
Mhm. What did you think of buzz droids? Because for me, I thought that was really unique, that we don't see this a lot in Star Wars. Is it's a lot of time it's the dog fights, it's the navigating the big ships, but in this case, there was like literal droids on top of their cruiser, and you see Anakin. He goes from trying to shoot them off Obi-Wan to trying to ram them. We see poor R4 that gets absolutely annihilated. And we could talk about justice for R4 later with Obi-Wan, how little he cared for his poor droid. And then we get like an R2 buzz droid showdown, which was pretty fun. And I love that, the buzz droid part, because this felt probably, in my opinion, the most endearing maybe we've ever seen Anakin in as adult Anakin with Hayden Christensen, because it's just, you see this one moment in time, he's not plagued by anger, hate. He's just, it's crazy because he's in the middle of a space battle, but you see how much he wants to protect Obi-Wan. I refuse, I'm not leaving without you, Master, even though he probably should. He's just cheering on R2 while he's taking on a buzz droid. He's just smiling. He seems so wholesome in this battle, in this moment, where we don't get a lot of those moments from Hayden Christensen, given the weight that Anakin, carries throughout the entire saga.
Yeah, well, first of all, I do love the buzz droids. Getting back to one of my other criteria for space battles, I love when there's originality,
Mhm.
and that's something we hadn't
Oh.
seen before. I love the shot. There's some shots in there that are really amazing when the clone gets ejected from the cockpit from when the ship
Mhm.
explodes. But yeah, I love that sequence with the buzz droids. I thought it was very fun. It was very original. It it kind of breaks up, I don't say monotony, but it kind of like is another little kind of
Mhm.
side thing. And like you said, we get to see Anakin almost in a Clone Wars adventure. It felt
Mhm.
like the Clone Wars Anakin, some of him his and Obi-Wan's side quests and adventures.
Right.
So I really like that. And the whole, like, that beginning scene I thought was really great.
Mhm.
I think it's one of the strongest openings in the series, definitely.
And we can talk about how the great contrast between Anakin and Obi-Wan in that. Like, Anakin's like, this is where the fun begins. He's having a great time. And then you have Obi-Wan just, flying is for droids. This absolutely perfect peak. Ewan McGregor grumpy Obi-Wan in this.
Exactly.
It's just absolute cinema. Anyway, so I'm gonna take us on another journey here, and we're going to hop into the original trilogy again. Let's talk about the space battle that really started it all, and is Yavin. I guess our first, real space skirmish is probably when they're escaping from, or I guess you could say the very first one would be the opening shot of the movie but I don't really count that as much, as it's very much just a boarding party, couple shots, but then you have the escape from the Death Star. But if you're thinking original space battles in Star Wars, what's the first one that comes to mind? It's probably the Battle of Yavin, the original trench run. What I love about this is, every time I love the, like, when they talked about it in like Light and Magic making this, and they brought up to George just how it's not realistic to have these things going so fast. in this trench run because it would be over in like 1 second because they're going that fast and there's not that much space. And George made what is really a critical decision in all of Star Wars, which is I don't care. Fast is awesome. Make them go faster. Who cares if it's realistic? And I love that because that through line is through all of Star Wars. There's so many things that happen in Star Wars with physics that are just impossible, but who cares? Because this is a movie. This is an experience that we're having. We're not trying to do, a space lesson for everyone. And I think that really defines this as well. And there's so many great characters that we get to meet here for the first time. Like we get Porkins as brief, he's in this movie for a handful of seconds, but every single Star Wars fan, you mentioned Porkins, they're like, oh yeah, the guy that got blown up a bit, or Plastic Biggs, where are you? There's so many great moments that happen in this. And I'm curious, as someone who lived the original trilogy as well, what was the defining moment for you in this battle, like that you kind of go back to when you think about it?
The last sequence. Well, first of all, like I said, another sequence it has not lost. It's almost 50 years old. It hasn't lost anything. And even the original version, which it's funny we talk about this because I'm sure you grew up with the special edition versions. I had the originals for about 20 years before the special editions came out, but it still holds up. I remember being a kid, seeing it for the first time, sitting in the theater and like almost pretending like I had a control, like the controls, like if I held onto the seat, like I could control it. Because some of those point of view shots when you're going down the trench, it felt like you were flying in the ship, and it's just so exciting. The stakes are so high. You look at it now and you're like, well, a lot has copied off of that, of course. But for me, that scene when, he turns off the computer and Obi-Wan's telling him to use the Force, and then Han shows up, clears the way for him to make the perfect shot. There you go. I mean, it just kept building and building and building. And it was just, when to see the Death Star explode for the first time. I have, when I saw it in the movies, I was 5 years old the first time, summer of 77. But you never forget those things. It's just, there was nothing like it. Now like a movie like we talked about, Mission Impossible comes out. Which is probably one of the best, but there's so many movies that come out in the summertime. We're going to talk about all the other movies that are coming out. This was it. This was it. So it was the main event, unchallenged.
And anytime I see Han coming back in to save the day, it gives me chills every time. And you cannot help but smile on your face. Like you have this big old smile whenever that happens. And I want to tell you something that you mentioned before. It's like you grew up with the special editions. So I actually grew up with VHS tapes of the original ones that were before the special editions that, we had before, for a long time. And so I actually remember when the special editions were released, and my dad and I were watching the original, and we went we'll go watch the special editions. And I vividly know, I could remember feeling a certain way when I saw the special editions for the first time with some of them. I remember seeing the Jabba's Palace song with the crazy song. I remember going, whoa. And I was a kid, going, this is different from before, and spotting, those changes was definitely, I still remember feeling a certain way even about it. And now I'm like, you can't go back. Or even with Phantom Menace, the first image of Yoda that I have with Phantom Menace is not the full CGI one that you see in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and now in Phantom Menace now on Disney Plus. It's they've changed it to that Yoda for the continuity. The first Yoda I think of is the goofy looking Yoda from when the movie came out. That's the one that is in my head every single time. And so that's one of the reasons why I know I'm gonna never get rid of my Phantom Menace DVD, because that's Yoda. That was it's not necessarily Yoda at his best and his finest. But I actually really appreciate having that because, and I
Right.
think that I wish it was more accessible for Star Wars fans to have the original versions of those movies because they're hard to get your hands on.
Yeah, I wish they didn't hold those so precious, or like that you were able to do it. Now, I have varying opinions on the special editions.
Mhm.
Um, I there are some things I really like. There's some things
Mhm.
that make sense, and there's some things I'm not that fond about. Like but like you, I've been able to find the
Mhm.
original, and sometimes it's just easier to put on the ones on Disney Plus, obviously.
Right,
But
of course.
um, yeah, like so I have mixed feelings about that. We could spend a whole other podcast on that, but for better or for worse, it's
Mhm.
it's there.
Which
It's good.
which rebel pilot are you most fond of that we meet in the Battle of Yavin? Like other than Wedge, because we see Wedge come back. We're like, what's one that we don't meet again that has their moment in the sun and is gone?
Well, I was gonna say Wedge, but I will say Biggs because there was, before all these deleted scenes were released.
Mhm.
I used to have there was a Star Wars like book, like with pictures
Mhm.
in it. Like there was the story book that had like pictures, and
Mhm.
there were all these pictures of Biggs on Tatooine with Luke, and I didn't see the shots until the deleted scenes were released
Mhm.
years and years later. But I, in my head, and in the comic of A New Hope, before it was even called A New Hope, they had those scenes at at the Tashi station and everything. So I was so, back then, like I said, the only way to see Star Wars was, it kept getting re-released in the theaters. They used to do that. Like sometimes you'd see a theater that would release old films. They would re-release Star Wars a lot.
Mhm.
Um, because it hadn't been on TV. It took
Mhm.
years for it to be on like TV or even cable or the VHS to come out. And it's crazy. I didn't even have a VHS when it came out. So, but I build up that whole story of Biggs in my head. So his character really, actually, I think I have one up here. Oh no, this is my Wedge. I think I have Big somewhere too. But like, yeah, that character really resonated with me, and I'm glad in the special edition they brought back some of his story.
Mhm.
Um, and I was hoping in Rogue One they would have him as a character, but I understand it
Mhm.
might have been too convoluted
Mhm.
at that point. But I mean, who knows? Maybe he'll show up in Andor season 2. We'll see.
That's true.
I
I
don't.
love the fact my personal one would be Red Leader when he misses and he's not able to do it. He's hit. He knows he's going down. He says, "They're like, do we want to come rescue?" He's like, "Negative, negative. Prepare for your attack run." And he's like, "This is it," or whatever. And he just has that moment where he's just like, "Yeah," and he just goes straight into the star, just like the Death Star. Like that's just an epic way for you know a rebel to go out, and we don't know any of his like backstory really. We've never seen this guy before in the movie he's in. We just know he's the man of he's leading this mission in every respect, and we get the sense that he's been through this so many times and he goes out in the blaze of glory. Like that's just, I think, a great way for a brief space battle character to go out in a lot of ways. So that'd be one of my favorites. But where would you like to go next? There's not a lot left. I have a few like quick hitters that we can go through, unless you have just one that you really want to talk about next.
I have one that I listed as honorable mention. It's not really thought about as a space
Mhm.
battle, but I think it
Okay.
was beautifully executed. Is the asteroid field sequence in The Empire Strikes Back. Um, Again, talking about, and I touched on this before, the poetry of the movement of the Millennium
Mhm.
Falcon and the way they, and I don't even want to say animated because they were actually, using models for it. But that's that scene, not just the technical achievement that was, but also just the beauty, the music, um, the choreography of the ships. That scene when the Millennium Falcon, like when it's the Star Destroyers are trying to cut it
Mhm.
off, and it does that like incredible motion going down, like that barrel rolled
Mhm.
down, and then the Star Destroyers kind of ram into each other. But I,
Mhm.
I think that whole sequence is just unbelievable. And
Mhm.
it's not really, when you think of space battles, you don't really, it's
Right.
usually
It's
not in
like
the
that little
conversation.
skirmish and they're on the run and they
Right.
go in the asteroid field. You got the tides coming after them and like it goes through the asteroid. Some of them collide. Yeah, that's a great one. I didn't really thought of that one when I was thinking through them, but that's good. I love the music for that though, the asteroid field music, and you get some great lines from that one,
Oh yeah.
as well, which is always iconic. Let's talk about I want to show you before we do, I want to talk about Exegol in a moment, but I actually, one of my favorite shots of all time, and it came out in like the Solo trailer, was when he's doing the Kessel run. They're leaving, Kessel, and you get the shot of the Star Destroyer blocking their path to get out and the ties coming after them. Like, I loved that just shot in that movie. It just screamed fear for me. The lightning striking and the storm, and you see the outline of the Star Destroyer and Han basically just going, "All right, skirt, we're going inside this thing," and they're trying to plug in L3 while he's avoiding, these ties. Like, again, kind of not really like a space battle, but in the same line of the asteroid chase. Like, this was one I always had a lot of fun with because Solo for me is just a great popcorn flick. Like, I put that on if I want to have a good time for a couple hours, just some low stakes fun. Put it on while I'm cooking, just to hear it in the background, even. So, and this is one of those like my favorite moments from this because getting like the backstory of Han Solo when he's piloting the Falcon really for the first time, in this scene. It's like, okay, this is when Han Solo, now he is Han Solo. He is piloting the Falcon for the first time. He's making the Kessel run. This is, for me, just a like core memory of Star Wars, like watching.
I agree. It's a very fun movie. Very fun movie. I really enjoyed it, and that is a great sequence. That one kind of I didn't think of either. It's
Mhm.
it's really well done. That whole Kessel Run sequence looks
Mhm.
amazing.
So let's go ahead and talk about the last main, one for the. Let's talk about it here for Exegol, last main saga film one, and this one. I would say because it's, the sequel trilogy sometimes gets forgotten about because I would say the Battle of Starkiller Base is not one of my favorites because it feels too close to me to Yavin and doesn't have the same, I don't know, I want to say like the same, the like almost grace to it, I guess. And there it just feels a little bit, there's too much going on. Like, I don't feel as connected to some of the other pilots outside of Poe.
Mhm.
Exegol has some higher stakes. I would say that the last 40 to 45 minutes of Rise of Skywalker, outside of Ben Solo not getting to say a word other than ow, I love the last 40 45 minutes of Rise of Skywalker. Everything else up to that point is like a half-baked chocolate cake that really needed a little bit more time to get the gooey stuff out of the middle and fill out a little bit more. But I love this moment when Lando shows up and he's like the ultimate hero that saves them, and he brings in this fleet, and it's just people and the whole, there are more of us. I get goosebumps every
Mhm.
single time. And yes, we see the ghost once again, so we know someone's piloting the ghost at this point. And this was just a great, I think, culmination of what Star Wars is about, the ultimate rebellion, which was people finally just having enough from all over the galaxy and saying like, this is the moment where we say enough is enough.
Right. And again, um, going back to one of the things I said, I don't like a mess sometimes of too many ships,
Mhm.
but it was glorious the way that they did that, and the music cue, and the way
Mhm.
that it's pretty much revealed. Um, and I loved it. I think the Battle of Exegol looks amazing. I love
Mhm.
the contrast against the stormy sky. There was some
Mhm.
really great visuals in that.
Mhm.
One criticism I do have of this scene, which I think would have made it more powerful, is I wish, and again, like you said, I like that analogy about a half baked cake, because I felt like, and this is due to a lot of circumstances that were out of their control with the way they had to pivot the story.
Right.
J.J. Abrams coming back, the death of Carrie Fisher, unfortunately. They had to change so much. They had a short time. I wish there
Mhm.
was more time, and I wish that, I mean, in my dream of dreams, I wish they would have broke the movie up into two parts, almost like Endgame and um, uh, what's the other,
Infinity War.
Infinity War, just to have more time. But if they weren't going to do that, I understand they had a release date, they had everything. I wish we would have known some more about. I know we got Zuri in this sequence, but I wish we would have known something about some of the other
Mm-hmm.
people in the ships that showed up.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been great to have a sequence of Lando and Chewie actually getting, making contact with certain, I guess,
Right.
members of the Resistance or sympathizers that were scattered. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it would have been more powerful, almost like at the end of Endgame when, the characters that were gone came back. You knew
Mm-hmm.
who they were. Obviously, we weren't going to have that depth of character in
Mm-hmm.
this sequence, but I wish we would have known more, have seen more of how Chewie and Lando convinced them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that one of the things that I feel was a missed opportunity was capitalizing off of, and Last Jedi has that amazing ending when they show the kids actually, kind of playing with the figures, and
Right.
like, that the broom boy, they call it, look up.
Mm-hmm.
It was just such a I wish that maybe they could have used some of that, the way that the galaxy then revered Luke Skywalker. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like that would have caused more people to come to the side
Mm-hmm.
of the Resistance. And in my head canon, I guess that's what I wanted to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like that would have been great. Otherwise, I mean, an amazing sequence, but I felt like that would have added more punch to it, to
Right.
have some kind of
Absolutely.
emotional connection with the people that did show up.
It almost so it almost feels like, and I agree with you in this, maybe having more time, 'cause, with my analogy I made was having the rebel or the resistance at the beginning of this movie almost feel like they've turned the tide of the war from where they were in, the Last Jedi. There's nothing left, and then we don't. There's a time gap, and it would have almost been nice if there was this some sort of scene paying, like you said, homage to Luke, and how the legend of Luke and what he did galvanized so many more people to the Resistance, to where when Kylo Ren is seeking out Palpatine and he's offered this fleet, it's from a standpoint of his grip. He feels like his grip is weakening and he needs something, and he feels a little bit more desperate to just grasp onto this Sith fleet that's now in his
Mm.
grasp. He's like, oh, this is how I regain control. And you almost feel a little bit more of the teeter-totter of the two sides, versus because similarly in in my goodness, Return of the Jedi, the rebellion is massive at this point. Like, you feel like they're ready to take on the Empire and have this final battle. Versus with the Resistance, you never get the feeling, given what happens to the Last Jedi, that they're ready for the scale of what's to come. And it almost would have been like, I would have liked to know that they're somewhat ready for this. And when that Battle of Exegol happens, the rest of the, maybe Lando does go for more reinforcements and he gets them, but having some sort of like teeter-totter effect in that movie would have been nice. But I do love the fact that you have that contrast of the light of all the ships, and then you go the darkness that everything's happening on Exegol. So this is like the controversial moment. What did you think of the landing party on the Star Destroyer? What is your thoughts of them essentially riding horses onto the Star Destroyer and having like the land battle that took place here was actually on a ship?
I thought it was wacky and amazing because I felt like, again, it was original. I've never seen
Mhm,
that before. I mean, I thought
mhm,
that was awesome. I like, and one thing I like about this, it's getting back to some of those original Lucas themes about the natural versus the technological,
mhm.
um, and how they couldn't jam it because they're not speeders; they're on horseback. I thought that was great. I don't know why people had a problem with it, but I understand. People, you could like what you like. I just thought it was a
Right.
great sequence. I thought
Mhm.
it was pretty awesome.
I was really upset when some people were like, "Oh my gosh, we're landing things on ships now." But I always tell people this is Star Wars we're talking about. Like, it's supposed to have some element of like, what is happening here?
Right. They
And
weren't in
th-
space, They
it's
were
yeah.
kind of
So I love the fact that we're let's just do it. Let's go for it. And to me, it's fun. Like, I just had a good time with that scene, and it reminded me, of Rebels when they're riding out with the Mandalorians come, and Ezra comes to get the Mandalorians to come save them at Chopper Base, and they're not riding animals on, in space, but they have like their suits on and they're just running on top of a star destroyer, shooting blasters, and Ezra has his lightsaber out as they're fighting stormtroopers on top of a star destroyer in space. Like, that's crazy. Obviously, it's a smaller scale because it's Star Wars Rebels, it's animation, and this is the culmination of a saga. But at the same time, this was great. I love the sequence where the fleet does come. You feel like everything is great, and then Palpatine does his, and there is the moment where they all kind of get electrocuted for a bit. The one weakness the sequel trilogy has with space battles to me is I don't feel that strong connection to anyone outside of Poe. And not that the original trilogy had all of these characters that were leading the charge, so to speak, in multiple scenes. Like, there's the connection to Biggs. You have the way that Red Leader goes out, that I feel like I'm more connected to them in their brief time than I did with some of these others. And there's even like the Porkins, like the humor of it that's gone. And we don't really get that in The Force Awakens or in Exegol. Like in The Force Awakens, it almost, I think, took that battle almost took itself a little too seriously in a sense, where they cut the music in certain parts and just had the sound of the battle going on, which is great for me. But there's been a common thread I think we've talked about here is like the glorious nature of interweaving the score into what's happening in some of these battles, and that may have been lost a little bit in some of these, but they're strong. But outside of Poe, and there's not one I'm really gravitating towards, because I'm like, oh, Wedge is back, and even with Zori and Babu Frick making their way, I think that's great. But I don't know if we spend enough time with them on their planet, Kijimi or whatever, to really feel like, oh, thank goodness that they're here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I feel like the only thing I felt like there was a space battle that in the sequel trilogy that I did have a connection, and that was the beginning of The Last Jedi, with Rose's sister, and with Tally, I guess is her name.
Right.
I felt like they had, even though they were small, they were great character moments. Especially Rose's sister. That was a great sequence how that was shot. I mean,
I thought I had an image.
Credit to Rian Johnson in that sequence. You really felt it. I don't know if I'm the hugest fan of the choreography of that battle, but some of the bombing runs were pretty cool, actually, and some of Poe's stuff was amazing. But yeah, I felt that way, I guess, like you said in the sequel trilogy about being tied to any of the. I wasn't as tied to like Snap or some of the other characters as much, but that like this opening scene in The Last Jedi, I don't know, for some reason Tally, just the way that I don't know, the way she was written or the way she handled herself, she didn't have much to do, but I just felt it was I don't know, I just felt her presence there when she was like commanding those A-wings. And Rose's sister. Yeah, Rose's sister,
Tally.
just the way they shot that whole scene, how she sacrificed herself, was really well done. But outside of that, yeah, I didn't feel a close connection to many of the pilots.
That's a great point, and it's Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker drops for me. But Tally, when she dies, when they're about to take off to defend the fleet while they're getting hunted, when she dies, that was one where I was like, oh, like not her. There was something about her and the way that they wove her in that I felt that loss, like I did when a gold leader dies, when a Biggs dies, or one of the other pilots from the Battle of Endor maybe that dies, and that I didn't feel with the other two movies in the sequels, but with her absolutely. Or like you said, Rose's sister, when they have the slow-mo, the music's cutting out, you just hit the beep of the little timer, the detonator, and she's laying there having to catch it. Like, there is a deep attachment you feel to her in that moment, and we didn't get that in the other, the sequels. And I think part of what makes this a little more forgettable is it happens at the very beginning of the movie versus it being the climactic space battle that takes place at the end. Because I couldn't tell you a single person who died in the Battle of Crate from when they're riding the little skimmer things out there,
Right.
skiffs or whatever they're called.
Though I will say this, that is a beautiful looking. I know it's not a space battle. It's a graphically beautiful, like the way they had that with the red and the those speeders. That was a really good sequence.
The Last Jedi, I think, is one of the I would probably put it at 2 or 3. 1, 2, or 3. I go back and forth. It just depends on my mood of most beautifully shot Star Wars movies. There are
Yeah.
some stunning shots in there. But absolutely. So before we move on to I have like one more quick hitter to talk about, but this is my favorite character of Last Jedi, Captain Kennedy. When we talk about characters that make space battles great, and we've talked about a lot of heroes in this, like from the from the rebellion or the resistance, but having a great bad guy also adds so much to it. He is perfect in this. Like just Captain Kennedy and the presence that he has in his little sequence there. Why are we firing those guys? Fire at the base! And the look of defiance that he gives as the bombs are going off on his dreadnoughts and he knows he's about to go down. To me, this just blows, you can say which one about Admiral Price when he goes down on Exegol. But to me, this right here, of all the Imperials we've ever seen die in a Star Destroyer, Admiral Piet, whoever, this takes the cake for me. This one is up there.
You see, you just see his range in there, like from the confidence down to like, they got us,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that line when he's like, we should have launched the fighters 5 minutes ago or something,
Bloody minutes ago.
Yeah, 5 bloody minutes ago. Yeah,
That's great.
he went too soon, unfortunately. He was a
Mm-hmm.
great character.
But also, there's a level of if you're wanting more, maybe that's the perfect thing to happen. Is I wish we had him more, but shows you the impact he had. It's like a season, a series of a show. You almost want the show to end when you're craving more versus getting to the point where you're like, all right, I'm just watching to see how this ends at this point. Which is kind of where I
Right.
was when I was watching like in my Walking Dead phase. So all right, we're past the hour mark, which is where I usually cap us off here, but that's fine. I have one more I want to talk about. Again, not a space battle. This is like a big old space battle. This is just a dog fight. But when I put this image on the screen, you will be able to hear it as soon as you see it. You know what I'm talking about? The
Yeah.
seismic charges. When we were introduced to a seismic charge in Attack of the Clones, when Jango is, trying to shoot down Obi-Wan, there is just peak in terms of sound design in that movie. And I will put this up there with any dogfight we've ever seen in Star Wars and beyond. This is just a whole lot of fun in just a couple of minutes.
That sound, I mean, I wish I could make a Spotify playlist of just that sound.
Or a song ends and then you just hear the seismic charge and it tells you that the song is over. You're moving on to the next one.
What a beautiful sound design in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just, and what an amazing weapon too. The
Mm-hmm.
devastation, and I'm so glad they brought it back in the Mandalorian too.
Mm-hmm. How many battles have you fought? Like, are you a big Star Wars video gamer like at all? Or
I
ever
I
have
am.
been?
I'm not as caught up because
I'm not a
unfortunately
big video gamer.
I feel like it'll take too much of my time up. So I try to
Mhm.
avoid as much as I can because I know I'll get like totally engrossed.
Right.
But
I'm not a big video gamer, but I love Star Wars games, and anytime growing up playing, Rogue Squadron, or you're playing some of the old yeah, or even just Battlefronts, and you get Slave One, or I guess they're calling it, this fire spray gunship now, and you get to use the seismic
so true.
charge. Whenever I invited a buddy once over to play, like I think it was like a Rogue Squadron 3 or whatever, and they had like a great dog fighting mode on that game, and I would pick Slave One, and I would launch that once, and sometimes I'm in middle school or whatever, and my friends aren't aware of Star Wars nearly as much as I am. Like they might not remember that ship right off the bat or that power. And I would just let them kind of get behind me a little bit on purpose. And then you just drop that and they're like, what the heck, dude? Like, what is that? That's crazy. And it's just a great moment. And I wanted to put this image up here real quick too, which is I love the moments where we get Daniel Logan and Django and Tamora Morrison together, where we won't be seeing him again. And I mentioned before, last thing, I want you to get in here, but last thing was I mentioned before how when I play Battlefront with the guys, it's always, oh, batteries, fire. Well, it's not from this scene. It's from, actually, no, it is from the scene. Never mind. It is from this scene. He's chasing him down. Something we always say is one of my friends, like Cody, Logan, or two of the guys I play Battlefront with a lot. At one point, someone will yell like, get him, Cody, get him, fire. Like just the whole get him, dad, get him, fire, like that. That's something that we always say. This is one of those random moments where it's just this happens, and you get the Obi-Wan. This is why I hate flying. It's just a great moment in Attack of the Clones, which is my least favorite Star Wars movie. Ironically, given that it's the first one I remember seeing in theaters, but this is just a great moment.
Yeah, it definitely. I actually like Attack of the Clones maybe a little bit more than you. I know a lot of people put it as the end of their list. It's low on my list. But I mean, I love it all because it's all Star Wars. But it was probably one of the best theatrical experiences. I saw it opening day in Manhattan, and it was this old theater. People were dressed up, and it was just everyone they were hanging on every line.
Right.
So it was a blast. I have good memories of seeing it in the theater. But yeah, I mean, it obviously it has its flaws, but there's some great things in there.
It is. I say my least favorite. I still love it because it's Star Wars, but there is a level of nostalgia I feel with it different than any other movie. Like it's the first movie not Star Wars movie, just the first movie I have memory of seeing.
Wow.
My emergency roadside assistance backpack in my car is my backpack that I had when I was 5 years old of Attack of the Clones. This is my Attack of the Clones backpack. The zipper doesn't even open all the way on the side. Like it's somehow carbon sealed in now, and
Nice.
I can only open it like 2/3 of the way, but it's still, I got all my jumper cables, like a first aid kit, like just in case anything happens. I have that backpack. I have all of the little speeders from the chase sequence where you could smash the speeders. There's those toys where you could smash them and then the parts would fly off from the movie. And I had all the creatures from the ring, that they fought in the arena. So that movie's always close. And the amount of times I quoted "this party's over," that's just one of the ones I always would quote from Samuel L. Jackson. So that was a great movie and some great moments. So Tom, we have gone through so many space battles in this episode. I think that we hit all of the big ones for the most part and gave plenty to discuss on that. Something that I love that you've been able to bring to the table here is having just a different experience of Star Wars than myself, which everyone has their own experience, but having the experience of being able to bring up like the stories of what it was like to get those action figures before the movie came out. And I love hearing that. And like, we need more stories like that as we continue to pass Star Wars on to the next generation. Like as these sequel, people are going to rise up at some point and overtake, myself, the prequels, kids as well. And so I really appreciate that. And I'm really glad that you're joining the team and you're here. And we're going to make some fun videos as well in the future.
I'm excited. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
So, of course, if you were able to muster up the strength to listen to an hour and 17 of us talking about space battles, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. You can check us out on Thursday night, 10 o'clock Eastern time for Star Wars News Net Live. And as always, check us out, Apple and Spotify at Star Wars News Net. We will see you Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time for Star Wars News Net Live. Do not know what we're going to talk about yet. Probably something, sprinkled in with Endor. We're going to do a couple deep dives into a couple of new characters. We talked about Saw Gerrera last week a lot, and we're going to, or was it Saw Gerrera? No, we talked about Bix and Brasso last week. Saw Gerrera the week before. We talked about Mon Mothma already. Maybe we get deeper dive into like Luthen, Vels, into some of those characters this week, or Dedra, I don't know. And then of course we'll have anything else that comes into mind over the next couple of days. Maybe we'll just talk about Mission Impossible instead of Star Wars on Star Wars News Net Live, Mission Impossible 8, Dead Reckoning Breakdown, Trailer Breakdown, something like that. So until next time, anyone, for Light and Life, remember, we are all the Republic out there.